Ring-a-ring-a roses, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down into the abyss of forgotten memories. The letter lay on Abigail Abby Fletcher's desk, as out of place as a shadow in a room of light. Its envelope was yellowed with age, the edges frayed as though worried by anxious fingers long since stilled. Abby's heart drummed a nervous beat as she reached for it, her fingertips tracing the curve of the wax seal before breaking it open. Inside was a slip of paper, no bigger than a bookmark. On it, a poem penned in ink that had long dried to the color of old blood. In Whitechapel's grip, where shadows thrive, lies a secret deep and dark, a key to history kept alive. Await your hand to disembark. Accompanying the cryptic verse was a small brass key, its teeth worn from use. The rumors had always whispered through Abby's family, haunting them like an ancestral curse, how her great-great-grandmother had once danced dangerously close to London's most notorious fiend, Jack the Ripper. Abby's journalistic mind buzzed with theories. Was this letter an invitation to delve into her own past? The air in Whitechapel clung to her skin like a clammy shroud as she stepped from the train. Fog twisted through the streets like ghostly serpents, obscuring the world beyond a few paces. The buildings leaned in over the streets, their windows empty eyes judging her. Abby wrapped her coat tighter against the chill. It wasn't just the cold, there was a weight to this place, a historical heaviness felt in each cobblestone that remembered too much bloodshed. She hurried on, feeling eyes on her back with every step. The bank loomed before her, imposing and indifferent to its role in this unfolding mystery. Inside, she presented the key and was led to a small room where a safety deposit box waited like a tomb about to be opened. The locket inside was delicate and ornate, silver tarnished from time with an engraving she could barely make out, The Reckoning. It felt unseasonably cold against her palm and filled her heart with an uneasy dread. Clutching the locket, Abby turned to leave, but stopped short. A chill skittered down her spine as she realized she wasn't alone. The shadows seemed thicker near the entrance, holding a stillness that was almost sentient. She left quickly, not daring to look back, until she was bathed in the flickering glow of street lamps outside. But even then, she could feel it, the unblinking gaze of something unseen in Whitechapel's embrace. Abby knew one thing for certain: her search for answers had only just begun. And somewhere in the murky depths of history's grip, something watched and waited for her next move. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Fog. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream, but some dreams are nightmares. The night had wrapped Whitechapel in its dark embrace, and Abigail Fletcher wandered its streets with an oil lamp in her trembling hand. The heavy fog curled around her boots like living tendrils, whispering secrets of a centuries-old horror. Abby could almost feel the breath of the city's ghoulish past on her nape as she delved deeper into its heart. Abby's days had turned to nights, buried under the weight of historical records, speaking to those whose families had been here when Jack the Ripper carved his legacy into the fabric of Whitechapel. She sat for hours with the local historians, their faces creased like the pages of the books they worshipped, listening to them recount tales blurred by time. The whispers started soon after. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in a silent forest, then growing clearer, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the fog itself, saying words she couldn't understand, followed by shadows that skittered away when she turned to look. Each time she convinced herself it was just a stray cat or a trick of light, but doubt nestled firmly within her mind. Abby frequented decrepit pubs where gas lamps fought against the consuming darkness. There, amidst the clinking of glasses and the murmur of hushed voices, she met an old tavern keeper whose tales were as engraved into his soul as the lines on his face. "Jack's spirit ain't never left us," he muttered over a pint of bitter ale. "Some nights, when the fog's as thick as thieves' fingers, you can hear him, laughing." His words sent chills down Abby's spine as she considered them against the backdrop of rain-slick cobblestones and flickering gaslight shadows on her lonely walk back to her lodgings. The obsession with uncovering what haunted her lineage led Abby into endless nights sequestered in her rented room, surrounded by mounting piles of documents. The locket lay open beside her, a chilling memento, as she scoured over an obituary for her ancestor tucked inside it. The words, "The Reckoning," etched beneath the printed name, stared back at her, mocking her with its meaning, yet uncovered. "No rest for the wicked," she whispered to herself, drawing a weary hand across her eyes. That whisper returned to her on a breath of cold air as she lay in bed staring out into the impenetrable fog outside her window. Abigail. It was nothing more than a sigh on the wind, so faint she might have imagined it, but deep down she knew she hadn't. She rose from her bed and approached the window. Her own reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale and ghost-like, before it was distorted by another voice in the fog calling her name once more. Abby pressed her forehead against the cold glass pane, searching for a source in the swirling mists. Was it real, or was it all unraveling into madness? The question hung in the air, as thick and unyielding as the fog that entrapped Whitechapel. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most doomed of them all? Abby Fletcher found herself whispering these words, her breath fogging the antique mirror's surface. A shiver ran down her spine as her own reflection seemed to tremble, the glass rippling like disturbed water. Focused, she watched the mirror intently, her heartbeat a drumroll in her ears, as the eyes that gazed back at her began to morph, darkening into a gaze that was not her own. The eyes of Jack seemed to lurch from history's shadowy veil, fixing her with a piercing stare that promised untold terrors. Her room in the old hotel felt smaller by the minute, the walls closing in as if they breathed with malice. Abby had become a recluse, the outside world fading away to nothing as she doggedly pursued her frightening quest. Torn between terror and an insatiable need for answers, she delved further into isolation. Items from a bygone era started appearing inexplicably in her room. A rusty scalpel, a blood-stained handkerchief, items that could belong in a museum, their presence an eerie reminder of Jack's haunting legacy. Victorian-era objects lay scattered on the musty carpet, bringing an authenticity to the supernatural events that tethered Abby to her family's dark past. Interviews with descendants of the Ripper's victims were wrapped in subtle fears and unspoken understandings. Their eyes told stories their mouths dared not utter, the legacy of trauma woven into their very beings. They spoke of a curse that spanned generations, while carefully sidestepping direct mention of the reckoning, as if merely saying it could invoke unspeakable horrors. Abby's mind was a whirlwind of analysis and fear. Every conversation added another layer of complexity to the puzzle, while simultaneously unraveling her sanity. The locket she found was always cold against her skin, its engraving a constant reminder of the imminent danger lurking unseen, yet palpably near. Nights were relentless. Visions assailed her dreams and waking moments alike. Each one brought forth more cryptic clues about the reckoning, painting a prophecy so grim it stole her breath. It was as if Jack himself sought to finish what he started so many years ago through her, the last descendant. One chilling evening, Abby stood before the hotel room mirror again. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Her chest tightened as she reached out a trembling hand to touch the smooth surface. Before her fingers could graze the cool glass, the mirror shattered with a sound like the world itself was breaking apart. Screams filled her ears. Were they her own? The shards cascaded around her like glittering rain in the moonlight, each piece reflecting not just her image, but also a sinister shadow that loomed over her shoulder. The room plunged into darkness, as if consumed by an inkwell spilling over reality itself. A suffocating silence enveloped Abby as she crumpled to the floor amid the broken fragments. Her last sight before succumbing to unconsciousness was a smoky figure in Victorian garb, stepping out from within the fractured glass. Jack's presence weaved into reality's fabric once more. In that final moment before darkness took her, Abby's thoughts were not of escape nor rescue, but of revelation and inevitability. Had she called this horror upon herself with her relentless digging? Was this the reckoning? The air around her grew cold as whispers filled the void. Her name echoed off unseen walls. And then, nothing but silence and darkness. London Bridge is falling down, but not before your screams resound. Abigail. Abby Fletcher's eyes snapped open, her heart drumming a frantic beat against her ribs. Darkness clawed at her vision, thick as the fog that had haunted her days in Whitechapel. A stale, musty scent filled her nostrils, a mixture of earth and decay that seemed to cling to the back of her throat. Panic threatened to choke her as she realized she was lying on a cold, uneven floor. Her fingers brushed against damp stone, and the air was so heavy with moisture it felt like breathing in liquid. She pushed herself up, head spinning, and tried to remember how she ended up in this gloomy abyss. The last thing she recalled was the mirror shattering, sending shards of glass cascading like a waterfall of diamonds before everything went black. Now here she was, somewhere beneath the surface of the city, where Jack the Ripper once roamed, in a tunnel that whispered of secrets and sins long buried. Abby fumbled in her coat pocket and found a small flashlight. A narrow beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing archaic brick walls that curved above her head. She shivered. It was as if the walls were closing in, ready to swallow her whole. Pressing forward, Abby's boots crunched over debris that shouldn't be there. Bits of lace, rusted metal that might have been a button hook, fragments of bone-white china with faded blue patterns. Each step was an echo in the silent tunnel, a reminder that she was very much alone. Or so she thought. A whisper skittered across the air, almost imperceptible. Abby paused, her light wavering. The sound came again, a soft sibilance that seemed to say her name. Abigail. It was neither warm nor welcoming, but carried the chill of the grave. Her breath quivered in her chest as she continued onward, deeper into the abyss. The flashlight's beam danced across inscriptions etched into the bricks. The Reckoning, each repetition more desperate than the last. They were messages from another time, warnings or prophecies perhaps, that made ice course through her veins. Then they appeared, translucent shapes flickering at the edge of sight, women dressed in Victorian garb with hollow eyes and outstretched arms. Their mouths moved silently as if trying to convey urgent messages from beyond. You. Why you? One murmured, her voice a thread of sound woven into the damp air. Abby wanted to run, but something rooted her to the spot, the need for answers that gnawed at her very soul. Tell me, what is the Reckoning? Abby demanded, her own voice sounding foreign in this tomb of memories. Their spectral hands pointed ahead to an archway where light did not reach. Heart hammering against bone, Abby walked toward it, as if pulled by unseen strings. Beyond the threshold lay a chamber with walls covered in old clippings and scrawled notes that told a tale of unfinished vengeance. And there in the center, a chair with restraints hung open like iron petals. The Reckoning is for you, whispered an apparition with tears of blood tracing down her cheeks. The room began to rumble. Dust cascaded from above as ancient brick and mortar succumbed to an unseen force. Abby's scream, a blend of horror and defiance, tore from her throat as she realized escape was but a dwindling hope. The floor buckled, and the ceiling groaned its impending collapse, a monstrous mouth ready to bite down. In those final moments before darkness reclaimed her vision once more, whether from crashing debris or something more malevolent, Abby's last thought echoed endlessly along with her scream. Was it Jack's whisper calling for his descendant, or had something else been waiting all along? And so it remained. Abby's fate dissolved into shadows and whispers beneath Whitechapel streets, the truth buried within the Reckoning.
Thank you all for joining me on this eerie journey through the dark and misty streets of Whitechapel. Together we've danced with shadows, felt the chilling touch of the past, and faced the whispers of a terror reborn. If the hair on the back of your neck stood up, if you found yourself glancing over your shoulder in a quiet room, then I've done my job well. Remember, every like is a lantern held high against the encroaching fog, and every subscription is a brave step further into the labyrinth of frights I have yet more to share. So, press those buttons with the same trepidation you'd feel in a haunted mansion's library. Who knows which bookshelf will swing open to reveal secrets untold? Stay tuned, brave listeners, for there are many more tales to be told and dark corners to explore. Until next time, keep your wits about you and never trust the reflections in the mirror too readily. This is your weaver of horrors bidding you a whispered goodnight. May it not be your last.